Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a special regular meeting. Our business should be relatively brief this afternoon. I'd like to call us to order at 3 o'clock, and as always, begin by acknowledging the territory upon which we're gathered, specifically that of the Plout, the Chilliwack, and the Samath. And we acknowledge these territories upon which we live, learn, work, and play, and upon which we educate the students of the Chilliwack School District. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the marginalization that many members of our community have experienced, whether as a result of race, sexual orientation and gender identity, or other personal circumstances. The board is committed to providing a working and learning environment that recognizes the inherent dignity of all persons, that is inclusive of all, and that treats everyone with respect. Just prior to the adoption of the agenda, I wanted to dispense with a small piece of process. Special meetings of the board are called in accordance with Section 8 of Bylaw 5, which requires the board to receive the agenda and supporting documentation within 48 hours of the meeting. It also further indicates that members of the board may waive by majority or vote receipt of those documents and supporting documentation if it is unable to be produced and all reasonable efforts were made. For our business today, basically, the supporting documentation couldn't be provided until yesterday, 24 hours before our meeting right now. With that in mind, I would ask that a member of the board move that we waive 48 hours notice of receipt of supporting documentation. I have that moved by Trustee Rieschelt. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Trustee Westerby. Is there any question on the matter? Not seeing any, we'll go right to the question. All those in favor of waiving 48 hours notice? Thank you very much, trustees. We have that waived and we can go right on to the agenda. The agenda's been circulated. Do I have a mover? Moved by Trustee Bondar, seconded by Trustee Thronis. Any discussion? Seeing none, right to the question. All those in favor? Thank you very much, folks. We have one item on our agenda. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Arul Purgasm to set the table.
Good afternoon, trustees, and thank you, Chair. This particular item is around a lease agreement that we are seeking to obtain. And so Assistant School Superintendent Kirk Savage has been working on this file with Secretary Treasurer Simone Sangster. So Dr. Savage, over to you just to provide some context. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As you can see in the decision report in front of you, I'm just going to pull it up on my screen so that I can follow along. Yeah, so we are looking to lease a third site for Queacle secondary, as well as the site would be utilized by our secondary schools. The site is we refer to it as storefront site, located on Luckakuk Way, near the new Canadian Tire, so in a downtown core, close to shopping and transportation, and central to the community. And we were looking at leasing this space for a variety of reasons. Listed in front of you are on the rationale. So there are four separate bullets there. So we have a large number of non-attenders in the school district that we support and are trying to get back into school. We also have scenarios at Queacle Secondary where we have a south campus at the old Chance site on Press Road. We have the site in the old Ed Center site, the old Robertson Annex. And with only two sites, we have situations where we have many kids that are on parole or that have no contact orders with other kids at Queacle, and those two sites aren't adequate. We need a third place to make sure that we're able to safely have students receive educational programming without running into each other. And we also have a number of students at our mainstream secondary schools who we are we're struggling to reconnect to mainstream schools. They're not necessarily alternate students, and but they're not able or willing to enter the school doors of a mainstream site. So we are looking at this site as being one of those safe and accessible and inclusive spaces where we can reconnect students who are at risk of dropping out. So there's quite a bit of information here. It's 3,200 square feet. We are looking also to bring in, there are some office spaces in this, which we are looking to have community partners sublet from us and partner with us. So This has the potential to be um, that foundry type of a site that we are eagerly anticipating, but we probably won't realize in Chilliwack for another 2 or 3 years. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the document, you will see that just the floor plan looks like, and I can just walk you through.
Yeah, I got them right there.
There it is. So this is the old Odlum Brown offices in between Ricky's Restaurant and Canadian Tire. You would enter through the top right is the entrance to the suite. And what we anticipate is that that large area when you first after you come through that little welcoming area, there's a large area that would be used for students. We can probably fit 12 to there's 15 probably 12 workstations in here, and then there's that larger boardroom as well right in the very center, and that would be a space for our bridge team working with those non-attender kids that we're trying to reconnect. So we sort of see two spaces in here that would be used by students with staff and community partners utilizing the other office spaces. There is there's a kitchen. There's two bathrooms, and it's a building that we're excited about the location and what we think we can do there. So that's a really quick overview of the space, what we're trying to accomplish, and yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Assistant Superintendent. I'm just going to remind members, so we're here to conduct first reading. First reading is discussion on the principles of the bylaw. Second and third reading are proposed for our regular meeting on Monday, the 30th. Second reading is debate and amendment. Third reading is consideration and final decision. With all of that said, I think that we can address any questions that are raised as best we can. And if there's anything that's left unaddressed, we can ask that that be brought forward for the board's consideration on Monday. Saying all of that, Trustee Richelt, start us off.
So I understand from the package that we're anticipating recouping some of the cost of rent from community groups, potentially leasing the other spaces. So have you already spoken to people and sort of obviously we wouldn't say who that is in this public meeting right now, but do you already have had discussions so you know that's a possibility, or is it just space we suddenly have that we think is going to be leased out?
Well, we've had some preliminary conversations. There's definitely interest there.
Okay.
And the majority of the lease would be paid for through our secondary schools. And then and then there is of course the ability to, once we go through our amended budget and we look at our enrollment and how we might actually be able to this space could quite possibly fund itself through the how we support kids long term.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And Trustee Bondar.
Yeah, my question's kind of related to that, in just that you mentioned there would possibly be some private partners in there as well as community groups. And so I was just thinking about the layout, and would this be a case of there needing to be a separate entrance? Or, I mean, I guess maybe that's a detail that we can discuss at a future meeting. But the first thing, just as far as, obviously student safety and concern that comes to mind there, just thinking of private business people or whoever.
Yeah, the main the community partners, I think we actually listed some of them in the proposal there. There's a piece there around it, this being more of that foundry situation where we actually have their communities like Pacific, like we're PCRS, community Chilliwack Community Services, Youth Probation. Those would be partners that would work alongside our staff and actually enhance the offerings at that site, similar to a Foundry or our NLC at Chilliwack Senior.
Okay, so it's nothing that would be private sector then.
There's potential that there could be an office that we might look at subletting that would be after hours, that would
Oh,
pay
okay.
for a large portion of. So there's that too. There's multiple.
Sure, there's lots of angles. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I have Trustee Prosty and then Trustee Thurmas.
So just on conversation, on Kirk, so the school, the school itself is, or this idea is not something that we have right now anywhere, right? Is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
So is this more of a place where students can go to engage with other people, with other adults to convince them of the worth of school, or is this in a place where is it going to be more of a counseling room, or is it actually going to be a classroom setting, or is it going to be more of a casual and what kind and how are you going to get them there? I know there's public transport, but is there going to be a little bit more of a follow through with I'm curious about how these students are going to why are students going to
Yeah.
end up there and not in Quebec? Like I realize there's certain reasons why you want to. It's just because you want a private spot, an area.
Yeah, those are really good. There's a lot of questions in there, Trustee Posey. But yes, the space is so first off, the vision for the space is that it will be a more of a drop-in kind of a scenario where students who are not attending or maybe taking they're taking some distance learning courses or they're doing some they're not able to attend regularly. There will be staff there that when the kids show up, they will help them work through their studies. So there will be a portion of kids that will work through sort of asynchronous learning at that site. Asynchronous meaning that they're working on it. They're not following your typical semesters, right? There is a piece here where the theory around storefronts is that there are kids that just will not go through the doors of a 1,500 student school. And there are also students that won't attend an alternate site such as Queacle. It's too scary for them. It's too far away. They have anxiety. This what the storefront does is when it's in an area where there's lots of, well, it's right next to the mall. Like it's actually a space where kids go. And it really it eliminates that barrier. So there's not there's other attractions in the area. There's transportation to the area, and hopefully they also come to the school. So they might go to the mall, but then they'll also come to the school for an hour, and we help reconnect them.
Has this been founded on any other? Has there been any experiments done on this in other districts?
Yeah, it's actually quite a popular approach in urban districts. So Surrey has Surrey, Vancouver, Edmonton. There's the storefront. I was actually in I was in Kamloops, and they had a storefront. I don't know much about it, but I drove by it. So there, other districts definitely use this as an approach uh, to find low barrier access to schooling for students who are at risk of dropping out or not graduating or you name it. And then
So,
with,
oh,
yep, no, you
sorry.
go ahead.
The one final up on that one was so this is a 3-year lease. If I'm correct, if I read it correctly, it's a 3-year lease. So is it going to be like in a 3-year if it so will you keep track of the like the positive, the negatives, like whatever? Would it be kind of observed objectively where it would say, okay, this didn't work or it did work, and then we'll continue the lease or we'll shut down the lease? So is that option there? So is it kind of an experiment in our part to try this?
Yes, well, we want to try this. We have some deliverables, measurables in the backgrounder there, but we also we're ensuring that we negotiate an out clause after a year. So I think we have to pay a penalty to get out of it, but we do want the option of if it isn't working for us at sort of the 8 month, 10 month mark, we do want the ability to be able to say this isn't working. But
And the
we
last question I have, sorry guys, I don't want
Trustee
to.
Prosy, I appreciate it. I do want to give other members, so we will make this the last one before we do another
Okay.
round.
Okay, thanks. No, I'll be it. So so then do you have an idea of how many people need this service? Like, do you have a fairly good, obviously, I think it's built on some assumptions
yeah.
from what I gathered from the writing. So I mean, so you have students that are like, you're quite confident that you would be able to engage them on this level?
Yeah, so on the we mentioned in the backgrounder there's these two lists. We have a 113 and a 112 list. So the 113 is this just SD33 wide. So to start in September, we actually had this year we had 28 students that were not attending school in September, but we were still needed to connect with them, and we still wanted to ensure that we were claiming them and following through. So we started out with 28 kids on that list. 14 through the work of the bridge team, they got half of the 20. So 14 of those kids went back to school, and 14 of them are still not in school. Since September 30th, so from October 1st until now, we've had roughly another 78 kids that are at risk that are not showing up, that the bridge team is trying to reconnect. So there is close to 100 students in our district that this site could be one of the ways we re-engage those students. And it doesn't mean they're going to be at this site full time, but maybe they start there and then we get them back into a mainstream school, or maybe they just finish, they do their schooling there. And then we also have the KSS specific students that are also struggling to attend. So there is just in that alone, there is a large group of students that we're worried about.
Thanks so much, Assistant Superintendent, and appreciate the questions, Trustee Prosy. Trustee Thronus, and then I'm just going to check in with Trustee Westerby before we're back to you, Trustee Richelt.
Just a couple of questions. Most of mine have been answered here. Are there leasehold improvements that are required at the site?
So as what are you referring to? Or do we have to upgrade the site at all in order to
Yeah.
do? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we are able to. They're actually leaving their furniture behind, desks, chairs, tables. We will. It's very little needed. We need to put in some Wi-Fi, some
Okay. Okay.
access. But beyond that,
So there are 28 plus 70, about 100 students on the first list. From the KSS list, how many students are there that have trouble attending?
well, so Queecole, they have roughly 200 students on their entire roster. On any given day, about 25% of those students show up. And so they have an ongoing group of students that are at risk of non-attending. However, in that specific homeroom, Trustee Thornes, I don't have that in front of me, but
Okay.
there is a
And
group.
how many students are we preparing for in this location? What do you expect?
Right. Yeah, great question. I think that the when our team was there looking at the space, we feel that it could at any one time we could have 15 to 18 students there, and that would be max. You wouldn't want more than that, right? So, but remember that kids aren't going to be attending at this site full time, right? They might come for an hour and a half on Wednesday, and then they might come the following Friday, and then a different group of kids. So on an ongoing rotational basis, we could serve quite a number of students there. It's yeah.
And how does this affect the students who attend? How does that affect our provincial funding?
So because we are um, so so for instance, we have this is where um, if students are attending a type 3 facility and connected to a program such as our bridge program, where we are actively reaching out and making contact and getting students attending through these over and above programs and approaches, we can actually we can receive full funding for each of these students. If we do not, and the kids sort of vote with their feet, we can't get any funding for them because they're not attending any classes. So it's really important that this site is connected to Queecole because it allows us to have it as a type 3 facility for those those one. So those two homeroom lists, 113 and 112, those are both type 3 facility Queecole funded students.
So we could almost fund the entire thing just by getting people to attend.
100%.
And one more question, sorry, one more question. How does a student actually drop out, or how do we know when a student has dropped out? And that's my last question.
They stop attending our sites and schools, and when we call home and try and make contact with them, they don't return our calls and they refuse to show up.
Thank you again, Assistant Superintendent. Appreciate the questions, Trustee Thronus. I just want to check in, Trustee Westerby, anything you wanted to raise?
No questions, but I do have comments in favor of the motion, but I'm prepared to hang on to them until we get there.
When we get there, we'll get to those comments. I'll just put a quick question of my own. In my experience as trustee, we have not leased property in the past. And so I just wondered if there's any sign off from the ministry required as a part of this process, or do boards of education undertake this on their own authority? I'm seeing nodding from the Secretary Treasurer. That's from within our own authority then? Perfect. I'm seeing the affirmative. Thank you so much. And I'll go over to Trustee Richelt.
So just a lot of trustees might not know this, but the Queecole Secondary before it was Queecole was the Ed Center and was a storefront. So this like having a storefront and leasing stuff on the part of the district isn't necessarily new. But what my question was about that was the Ed Center before we made it into a proper actual high school with like more robust programming wasn't super effective. So for anyone who does remember that, I got from the reading in the package that this is basically to get kids back re-engaged with the eventual hope they would end up back in school, either back at one of our three or four regular high schools or back at Queecole ideally. So it's meant to be a transition back to school, whereas the Ed Center was kind of like a last ditch thing, which is different. So am I correct in understanding that this really isn't, it's not at all intended to be just, this is where we send kids to go to school. This is a like capture those kids that will not attend in our current models. Is that correct?
Correct, except for maybe the few kids that just refuse, and that's the only way we can.
Right, but
Right?
that's the same. Yes. So
Like
for those kids that just won't walk through a front door, but ideally, like there are some kids who just it's too overwhelming to think about trying to get to school every day, and this would be maybe if we can get them 1 day a week or 1 hour a week, and then 2 hours a week, and then 1 day a week, and then bridge them up into getting to school. But
correct.
okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Trustee Bondar, I recognize your hand. I just want to invite Superintendent Rule Pergasm, acknowledging his hand.
Thank you. Just really quickly, and I think this goes back to a variety of questions. If you had watched the news recently, there was a lot of pushback in another school district, a larger school district, around them closing a storefront because for those very few kids, the traditional schools did not work. That was their home. Eventually, Trustee Richard, you're right. These students need to go back to a regular school. But I'm going to let you know, given our current system, our regular school doesn't work for all kids. And so that's one consideration. And number two, trustees, back in 2016, we had a board motion around trying to revamp our alternate schools structures. We never got to that. And so at the end of the day, these students require a place school that they can actually relatively engage in. And so these are all ways of trying to re-engage kids with the school system. That hasn't worked for them at some point. Thank you, Board Chair.
Thank you so much for the additional context. Trustee Bondar, please.
Thank you. Just a couple quick ones, and I will say I also agree. I think it's a great idea. Ultimately, just curious, you mentioned almost like a drop-in type of basis, and then you also mentioned there would be two different programs there. I'm wondering, will both be kind of based like that, or I thought that the two different programs, one was sort of a little more accelerated than the other, or yeah, maybe you could just speak to that, and that's with that number of seats. Thank you.
Right. So there'll be a program that'll be just for Queecole students, right? So it'll be a third Queecole site. There'll be a program for that we run through the bridge staffing, which is the kids that are on those two lists of they're not attending. We're trying to pull them back in. There will also be some students, in a third way, there'll be students from the secondary schools that are not connected to Queecole. They're connected to GWG or Sardis Secondary or MAD or whatever, that those students are not, they've been come through the district resource team. They're not showing up at their home school. They're not being recommended for alternate, but we're kind of like, what can we do for those kids? So there will be some kids that will also come from the mainstream schools that have been captured in the 1701 September offering at the secondary school. So they'll still be owned by their home school, but they could also attend this site to get tutoring and support and help. Again, back to Trustee Richelt's comment, back to their home school. So the big piece here is really the big thrust is we want to get kids back to their home schools and use this as a low barrier. There will be some kids that are currently at Quiacal that this might be where they attend school most of the time for periods of time. I hope that, and then there will also be some community partners, we hope, where they'll be doing some, maybe some counseling or some meetings or some different things, offering those community services to the kids in those programs that need it. And that'll be again a more an accessible place for those meetings to happen. So we're seeing this as a real opportunity to bring a lot of resources to bear at one site. Again,
Agreed. Yeah. So
yeah.
I was thinking like if it seems like you're having more people every day, you're having to turn people away based on the capacity of the building for bodies, it may be then that you use that out that you discussed, which could be to find somewhere bigger or is that an angle that you're even thinking about? Or is the idea that even with all of those programs, you're unlikely to be at capacity?
We don't know.
And I'm just gonna hop in there to acknowledge we're in this challenging position of considering the lease. That's ultimately what's before us, which comes back to essentially the business plan that staff have put together. But I appreciate that the interest of members is really in what is the experience of students, how does this enhance and support student learning and academic outcomes for those learners. Um, this will be on the Monday agenda. So I want to invite members if you sit over the weekend and have further questions, if there's members of the community that end up having questions of their own, that is an appropriate venue to raise them. Is there any objection from members if we proceed with first reading at this point? I'm not seeing any. Um, did we just lose someone? No, sorry. Perfect. Okay, I'm wondering if there'd be a member willing to move. Trustee Reschild.
Oh, can I see the screen again? I can pull it up on my phone if you need to. Okay, I move that the Board of Education approve first reading of school district number 33, Chilliwack, 103-45425 Luckacuk Way, Chilliwack, BC, lease acquisition bylaw 2025, number 0.2025-09.
Thank you. Before the motion seconded, I'm just going to raise a point of order. I believe our executive assistant is bringing our attention to. Have we lost Trustee Bondar?
We have.
Okay. I'm just going to ask that we take a 2-minute recess, and then we'll come back. The motion's in order. It's not yet been seconded. So before we move into that, we're just going to take a 2-minute recess, see if we can bring Trustee Bondar back online. If not, we'll proceed with our business accordingly. I'll invite members to turn off their camera at this point, and we'll take 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm back.
Not at all, Trustee Bondar. We took a brief
Rob.
recess.
Okay, sorry.
Cameras are still live, but we're not in order right now. So we'll just
Okay.
invite everyone back and
I do not know
dive
what
back in.
happened. Suddenly I was just out.
Absolutely no
Sorry
problem
about
at all. No, no, not at all. I know one of our colleagues had trouble with power in their region.
that.
Um, we live in an imperfect world.
Yes, thanks everybody. Sorry about that.
And as soon as we have confirmation of the Secretary Treasurer's presence, we'll come back to order. Executive Assistant McAnally, you could acknowledge just a brief recess at 3:28. And we're going to call back to order at 3:30. And I thank everyone, appreciate everyone's flexibility. We have a motion on the floor. The motion is that which was recommended, and that is to approve the lease. Do we have a seconder for the proposed motion? We have it seconded by Trustee Westerby. It was moved by Trustee Richelt. I'd like to invite you to open discussion.
I'm fully in favor of this motion. I think it's really important, and thank you to staff that we are always trying new things to make sure that we get kids through high school and to graduate. And obviously, I think it was an awesome move that we made to create Queacle Secondary as a true school that kids could have pride in, but obviously it's not working for all students. And so I think this is a great idea, and I'm fully in support. Thank you.
Appreciate the comments, Trustee Richelt. Trustee Westerby.
Thank you. This is a really awesome proposal, and just really excited to see the creativity that's being offered to the students to really reach them. I would just recommend to the trustees to really read through the package that was provided. It's a 16-page document and has tons of detail about the work that the bridge team is doing, and it's just really thorough. So it's a long read, but it's a great read. Really explains what's going on here. And just want to speak in favor of the first reading and look forward to the second and third on Monday.
Thank you, Trustee Westerby. The floor is open if there's additional comments from members. Not seeing you, I'll put a quick comment to my own, just to acknowledge my appreciation for the background provided. I wanted to acknowledge there's always this challenge of what is the financial implication of making these agreements? And there is the weight of conducting this business via bylaw. Part of the business case looks at the secondary schools providing from their own funding in order to enable this. As has also been outlined by staff, there's the ability to support partnerships within the community to create what was noted as almost its own little mini foundry. And as Trustee Richelt and I heard last week, that process is not expected to be complete until at some point in 2027. So if we see this through for the full 3 years and it proves to be successful, this may be the bridge until those more robust supports are available in our community. So speak in favor of first reading, and I'll turn it over to Trustee Bondar.
Yeah, just briefly, I also agree. And I think the location piece that you said is so important because it really is enticing for other reasons. And who knows, coming for an hour, if that's on the possibility list, makes a lot of sense to me. So that's it. Thanks.
We can do a last call before we go to the question. Not seeing any comments from members. The motion before us is that the board approve first reading of School District 33 103-45425 Lacakac Way, Chilliwack 33 Lease Acquisition Bylaw 2025, number 2025-09. All those in favor, please indicate. Thank you very much, folks. We have first reading approved. With that done, we've reached the conclusion of our agenda. I want to acknowledge that the regular public board meeting will be held at noon on June 30th. It'll be at the school district office, as is our usual location, and will be live streamed for members of the public that are unable to be there in person. Of course, members of the public are welcome and invited to attend, and we'll be looking forward to the discussions as we wrap up the year. We're at 3:34. I want to thank everyone for your time this afternoon. Appreciate staff for working to get through this bylaw process, noting this is a tight turnaround in order to honor the work being done with partners and agents through this process. And with that, 3:34, we're adjourned. Thanks so much, everyone.